Well, you got your attention with that one. Gives me great pleasure now to introduce our speaker, Mike from Chandler, Arizona.
I'm Mike. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is April 23rd, 1985. For that, I'm grateful. Thank you, Shirelli, and the committee for inviting me to be here. So nice to be able to visit with Johnny and Clancy and so many people I haven't seen in a while. It's always an honor to be invited to speak anywhere. This is a particularly great honor for me to be able to be here. When Shirelli called me and she said, we'd like you to come over and speak for us at the powwow. Are you familiar with the powwow? And I'm like, well, yeah, everybody is. And so I agreed to come, and I figured that I would, maybe be Thursday night or Friday night or Sunday morning. And then she said, well, you'll speak for us on Saturday night. So that's given me a little bit to think about for the last couple of months. Waiting to come up here today, I didn't know which was worse, waiting to come up here or waiting for the horse race this afternoon. I gave my sobriety date, and as I go on this evening with my talk, you're going to hear that I spent a lot of time in Texas because that's where I got sober, and down there they all give their sobriety date. So I've always kind of stuck with that. There was a meeting down in Lubbock or Amarillo or somewhere, and they're going around the room, and this one says, I'm Tom, and I haven't had a drink for this period of time, and I'm Dorothy, and I haven't had a drink for that period of time, and I'm Bob, and I haven't drank for this period of time, and Ed says, I'm Ed, and I haven't found it necessary to have a drink for 14 years, 6 months, 3 weeks, 4 days, and 8 hours. And David turns around and says, Ed, that's a lie. I saw you Saturday night, and you were so drunk you couldn't get down the street. He said, yeah, but it wasn't necessary. I want you to know that I am convinced that everything that I did prior to getting into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous was necessary to get me to and keep me in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I am grateful for our traditions, because if we didn't have the traditions, I wouldn't have been allowed to come in. Somebody asked me earlier, are you nervous? I've got a pretty good idea what I'm going to say. You have no idea what you're going to hear. If anybody should be nervous, it should be you and not me. I do feel a bit like a mosquito in a nudist camp, though. I know what to do, I'm just not sure where to start. A number of years ago, some of you will be able to identify with this. I woke up in the morning, I had a concern, and I laid in bed and I thought about my concern for a couple of minutes, and it turned into a problem. Nothing changed, and I laid there with my new problem, thinking about it for a few more minutes, and it was a crisis. Wasn't long, and I was immobilized. And I finally got myself to my phone, and I called Howard, my sponsor. And a lot of you know Howard P. from Gilbert, and I'm sure he would want me to share his love with you, because I know a lot of you are close friends with him. And I called Howard, and we went and had breakfast. And we were sitting across the booth. I'm sitting across the booth with Howard, and I gave him my crisis. I said, Howard, this is going on. And he looks at me and he says, your life is in divine order, unfolding into goodness. And I'm like looking at him. So being a salesman, I kind of regrouped and gave it to him from another, this time I'm going to get him to respond the way that I want him to respond. So I gave it to him again. And again he says, your life is in divine order, unfolding into goodness. And I think he saw the puzzled look on my face as I'm looking to see if he's got his hearing aids in. And he said, if you go back through your life at all the circumstances and events that have occurred that brought you to this moment right now, you'll see how God has pulled a golden thread through each and every one of those circumstances and events. You can trust your life. It's unfolding into goodness. And I went home and I did his exercise. And in my meditation, I began to look back through my life. And that's kind of what I'd like to share with you tonight in a general way, is what happened, what it was like, and what it's like today. When I was 7 years old, I lit the house on fire. We grew up in a little town outside of Buffalo, New York, in a place called East Aurora. My dad was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and my mother was a member of Al-Anon. My dad got sober when I was very young, but I remember lighting the house on fire that day and sitting across the street on the neighbor's porch while the firemen came busting into the house and they blocked the road off, and all the excitement and everything that's going on. And there's 7 kids in the family, so the neighbors are counting how many kids are up on the porch to make sure everything's okay. And I'm sitting there on the porch. I'm 7 years old thinking, there ain't no way I'm ever telling anybody I did this. I had a lot of sleepless nights for the months that followed, and I remember going to my mom and I said, I did it. And she said, what? And I said, I lit the house on fire. She said, oh, we knew that. Wasn't long after that, I was up into the main street of our town, and I was in one of the stores, and I saw something that I wanted. I didn't have the money to get it, and I took it. And I knew that was wrong. That wasn't the way I was being raised. That wasn't what my folks were teaching me, or they were teaching me in the Catholic school. None of that, but I did that, and I knew it wasn't the right thing to do. And I felt bad about that. I felt like I was a disappointment because I felt like I couldn't live up to other people's expectations. And they weren't even giving me expectations. These were things that were being imposed by myself, knowing what was right and what was wrong from the things that I was learning. And I knew I couldn't do that, so I must be a disappointment. And I continued to be a disappointment in all the things that I did. At least that's how I felt. Remember my brother John's first communion. He and I stole some beer out of the cooler, and we went and we drank it. And, nothing, no big deal. Nothing really happened. But I went and stole some more beer and hid it in the woods so I could have it the next day, and I didn't tell him. So that from the first time that I drank, I started planning how I could do it again. There was some thrill. There was something about that. And every occasion from then on that I could drink, I did. We'd get together to play baseball in the field or basketball in somebody's backyard or do the sports that you do as a teenager. I would plan for it by getting one of my older brother's friends to get some alcohol. And I would get that so that I could drink because I knew that would make me perform better. But every occasion that I could, if one of my friends invited me to their house, it would be like I'd be looking around. Do your parents have a liquor cabinet? Maybe we ought to drink. So I was always trying to figure it out. Always trying to find how I could get a drink. I was always wanting the next drink. Now, you don't become a daily drinker when you're 7, okay? And my story's not real macho, and I'm not going to bore you with all the details of the drinking and the things that happened. But I will tell you that it wouldn't have been uncommon for you to find me sitting in the park any particular night drinking by myself before I was even in high school. By the time I went to high school, I was drinking every weekend, and I had already been introduced to other substances that I don't need to discuss here. But I was doing as much of anything that I could. And I don't know, alcoholics often talk about how we feel, and then when we drink, that we learn to be okay with how we feel. I don't think I was ever comfortable. I don't think I was ever right. I don't know that I was born an alcoholic, but I think when I was born, I was crying. It was never right. It was never right. My first detox was in Children's Hospital. They don't laugh at that at church, but at AA, they're like, ha ha ha, Children's Hospital, did you get that? Real macho. So here I am, I'm in Children's Hospital, and I was in there for 9 days, and my dad and his sponsor and other members of Alcoholics Anonymous would come and visit me. And while they were there, they would say things like, maybe you should come to AA. I was 15 years old. And I'm thinking they're telling me if I want to get out of the hospital, I'm going to go to AA, so I'm going to sign up for anything. And then they said, you probably need to go to counseling. And I'm like, that's great, I'll go to counseling too. So I'm going to go to AA and go to counseling. I started going to counseling a couple of weeks. That was working pretty well, at least in my mind, because a couple of weeks after I started, the counselor and I were smoking weed together. So I'm like saying to my parents, is it Tuesday? I went to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous in the bottom of the police station, Orchard Park, New York, on a Friday night with my dad and his sponsor. And I remember walking down those stairs, and I remember before we even got to the door, we're getting out of the car in the parking lot, and I'm like looking around to make sure no one sees me. And my dad, all of the people in that community had been to our house because my mom and dad were very active in the program. It wasn't at all uncommon for drunks to be at our house in every stage of sobriety, celebrating birthdays and getting ready to go to their first meeting. The New York State Police would occasionally drop drunks off and put them to bed on our front porch, and then my dad and his sponsor would take them to meetings, and my mom would make meals, and there were always donuts in the house. I remember loving that. And my mom used to love to tell the story that there was a guy there. It was early one morning, and we kids were getting ready for school. And my little sister Mary was probably around 10, 11 years old at the time. And there's a drunk sitting there at the breakfast table drinking his coffee, and he's extremely remorseful, and he's whining. Oh, I feel horrible. I am so embarrassed. This is terrible. I can't believe, I'm so ashamed. And my little sister finally just said, listen, we've seen way worse than you. How's that for ego deflation from a 10-year-old? So I'm in that meeting, that first meeting that night, and I knew most of the people, and I just assumed that they thought that my dad brought one of the kids along, So I thought it would be quite an amazing thing for them to hear, that I was there because I had a problem. And they're going around the room and introducing themselves. I'm Art, I'm an alcoholic, and I'm Tom, and I'm an alcoholic. And it came to me, and I said, I'm Mike, and I'm a problem drinker with alcoholic tendencies. And I said that because looking back on it, I said it because there was something permanent about the confession or the acknowledgement of being an alcoholic. And that might mean that I have to stop drinking. And I was afraid of that. I was 15 years old, and I was afraid what my life could be like if I stopped drinking. I would be boring. I wouldn't be able to do anything. There would be no fun. I couldn't do it. And they said, keep coming back, kid. Keep coming back. And they also said a lot of other things that were really weird and way over my head. And I mean way over my head. I just didn't get it. They said things like, it's the first drink that gets you drunk. And I'm like, you call yourself alcoholic? Yeah. I remember saying to my dad, now wait a minute. The first drink has never gotten me drunk. And he's like, if you got killed by a train, would it be the engine that kills you or the caboose? And I'm like, why would I be on the train tracks? They said things like, if you waddle like a duck and quack like a duck, you're probably a duck. I'm home looking in the mirror. Way over my head. I just didn't get it. I wasn't ready. And they said, keep coming back. I remember hearing that. And somewhere, somehow, I thought Alcoholics Anonymous was don't drink and go to the meetings and your life is going to get better. That's what I thought AA was. And I would go to these meetings and I wouldn't drink. And I would sit in those chairs. And I want so badly to be able to be happy. I want so badly to be able to have some good things going on in my life. But every time I stopped drinking, I got worse. I didn't get better. I couldn't handle it. The only solution I had was to go back out. And then I would go to the places that you told me about. The hospitals, the psychiatric wards, those types of things. I remember being in a psychiatric ward and the girl's doing the intake. And as she's doing the intake, I'm trying to convince her that a life with me would be a good move. I swear they put alcoholics in the psych ward to entertain the patients. Thank God Alcoholics Anonymous kept saying, keep coming back. Because there was nothing else I did right. And every time I went back out, it got worse. And I'm not proud to tell you that for the next 10 years, I went to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous and I never got 30 days sober. I thought this wouldn't work for me. I thought there was something wrong with me. There had to be a little bit different than what was wrong with you, because you were getting this deal. You were getting better. You were getting birthdays and cakes and jobs and girlfriends and marriages and families and parades and plaques and all kinds of cool stuff. And all I was getting was a resentment, and I kept feeling like I was a failure. I kept feeling like I'm a disappointment. I can't even do this AA thing. And my life was just over. And I got sicker and sicker and sicker. The best thing that ever happened to me prior to coming into Alcoholics Anonymous, I was ashamed of. And that was I graduated high school, and I knew I didn't deserve that. When I was walking across the stage, and you can just, it's a big crowd, probably twice as big as this. And, well, probably not, but yeah, I think we had about 150 in the graduating class. But my mom, my dad, my grandmother, people from the community, and I'm walking, they call my name, and I'm walking across the stage, and one of the guys yells out as loud as he can, one of my nicknames, drugs. I don't know where I got that name, but I know, again, I was nothing more than a disappointment to everyone. My life continued to crumble. Things continued to get worse. I continued to feel like I was useless, like I was a failure, like I was a disappointment. Finally got to April 21st, 1985. I broke into a house in downtown Buffalo, and I knew the people who lived there, and I knew he had a gun, and that's why I went there, was to get his gun. And I couldn't find the gun. I looked all over. Later I found out he was target shooting. The golden thread pulled through my life, through all the circumstances and events, the good and the bad. And here I am in this house, and I can't find the gun, and I'm at the top floor, and I'm looking out, and I'm trying to think, if I dive out that window, am I going to die, or am I going to flop around in pain? And I don't want any more pain. Enough. And I see these three ladies walking down the street wearing these funny church hats. I don't know if it was a hallucination, but for some reason, I thought of the God of my childhood. And I got down on my knees in that room by myself early that morning, and I said the same prayer many of you have said. That was, God help me. Now, I've studied a lot of AA history, and I've been privileged to spend a lot of time doing AA history. And Bill Wilson, when he was in Towns Hospital, he yelled out, if there's a God, show himself. And he said the room lit up a bright white light. And he could feel the breeze, and he knew it was a breeze of the Spirit blowing through, and he had been released. That didn't happen to me. I drank all day. At the end of the day, I called my old man, because he was the only one left that I thought might be willing to help me. And I said, Dad, I need some help. And he said, where are you? And I told him, and he and another member of Alcoholics Anonymous came and met me, and they did a 12-step call. We sat in a diner, and we drank coffee, and we talked about my options. And I didn't have any. I had no options. A series of events began to unfold around that time, and my dad called a friend of his down in Texas, and this guy's name was Big John. And he got a hold of John, and he said, John, I got Mike here, and we don't know what to do with him. He's in pretty bad shape. And John said, send the kid down here for a couple of weeks. We'll see if he wants the deal. And they were trying to get me into the detox before they got me on an airplane. So I had it all figured out. I was going to go into Erie County Medical Center. I had been there numerous times. And my brother dropped me off, and I walked in, and I got into the lobby, and an admissions counselor came out, and he put his hands up. And he said, no, you're not coming in here. We can't help you. You've been here too many times. It was as if the gates of hell slammed down on me. That feeling was unlike any feeling of hopelessness I had ever had. And I walked outside where my brother's truck was, and there was a taxi cab. I said, take me to a bar, because it was the only solution I knew. There was nothing left. There was no solution to my problem. And I got in a bar, and I ordered a drink, and it was a beautiful day. It was April 23rd, and the door was open, and the sun was shining. And you remember that stuff when you grow up in Buffalo, and it's April. And the sun is shining, and a city bus pulls up. And a lady was trying to get on the bus, and she fell. I walked out, and I helped her get on the bus. And I walked on the bus after her, and I've never gone back for that drink. Now, I want you to know, Clancy shared his story this morning. He was talking about The Secret. And he talked about, Ebby going to Bill. And Ebby said to Bill, this is a new kind of giving. This is a giving where we don't expect any return, where we don't expect any reward. And I think that perhaps that act that I did, because I have found out over my years of sobriety that the only thing that ever works for me, the only thing that ever changes anything in my life are the actions that I take. And I think the action that I took to help that lady instead of taking her purse and running, I think the fact that I helped her made a difference. Now, I felt like I was ripped off years later when I was, studying AA history. I was a little jealous of Bill Wilson. This guy got to have this profound spiritual experience. And I'm thinking, why didn't I get one? And then I thought, when Howard had told me that, wow, maybe that was it, Mike. Maybe you missed it. Maybe that transformation happened when you took that act of unselfishness and helped that lady get on the bus. Maybe that's when you had your release, because I never had to have another drink from that day to this day. I made it to Texas. I got down there on May 5th, 1985. I was greeted at the airport by Big John and 2 other members of Alcoholics Anonymous. They used to come and cruise to get me. He took me to a meeting that night. On the way to the meeting, he said, listen, kid. He always called me kid. He actually had 2 names for me, Kid, and Howard asked me not to share the other one from the podium. Okay? He says, listen, kid, if it comes to you tonight, just give him your name and your sobriety date if you've got one. So I made one up. And we got back to his little 1-bedroom apartment. I remember I went down there for 2 weeks. We got back to his apartment. John was a big guy. He was an attorney. And he was a boxer. He was a big guy. And he's pacing. And I'm sitting on the couch. And he says, how long have you been around the deal, kid? With as much ego as you can have when you weigh 90 pounds. Everything you own is in a cardboard box. And you got nothing. I looked at him and said, about 10 years. He says, I don't know if you got the guts it takes to make this deal, but if you do, we can show you by living proof how you never have to live this way again. And if you want to get sober, I'll go to hell and back with you. And if you don't, you can go to hell alone. I'm like, where's welcome to Texas? Then he did something that changed my life forever. He said, you are nothing but a thief. The worst kind of thief, because you stole from those you love the most their right to happiness. And I want you to know that for those 10 years that I was in and out of the program, I was a victim. I was telling everybody, if you just take care of me, get me a job, give me some money, a place to live, forgive me for this, I'm going to be all right. You'll see it's going to be different. I'm a good guy. There was never anybody with better intentions than me, and I know that. He said, you were nothing but a thief because you stole from everyone that you love their right to happiness. It was like he entered the cave where I was isolated in despair and hopelessness. And he grabbed me by the hand and he led me out to the sunlight of the Spirit. And he was able to do that because it was one alcoholic talking to another alcoholic. He wasn't talking down to me. He met me where I was. And he reached me where I was and he began to lift me up. And he began to do things for me that I desperately needed to have done for me. I always say if shut up and listen would have worked, I'd have gotten sober when I was 7. I needed some encouragement and some discipline. I needed some direction and some guidance. I needed some understanding, and he gave me that. Now I want you to know, he didn't give it to me all the time the way that I wanted to receive it, okay? But I knew he was sincere. And when he said that and he began to walk with me, remember the first day that I was in Texas, the first morning he came in the bedroom and he woke me up and he said, come on, kid, come on. I said, come on? It's 8 o'clock in the morning. He said, come on, we got places to go, people to see, things to do. You're 80. I don't know anybody in Texas. Let me sleep. No. Come on, kid. Come on. We got to go. I get up and get some coffee in me, and he takes me to his best friend's house, Bill O. Okay? And Bill and his wife, Arbutus, had the Midwest Tape Library. And we got to Bill O's house, and John says, Mike, this is the Midwest Tape Library. It's the largest AA tape library in the world. And I'm thinking, who cares? And Bill greets us at the door. And Bill's got one eye and one arm, okay? He lost him in traffic accidents. And he's wearing a jacket, too. These guys always wore jackets. And Bill just looks grumpy. There's no nice way to say, I mean, he was a prince of a man, but he just looked that way. So I nicknamed him in my head. I didn't have the guts to say it, but I nicknamed him Grumpy. So we get in the house and I see all these tapes and, so you got John and Arbutus and Bill and myself and this small little tape library, and we're chain smoking and drinking instant coffee sitting at this table. For the younger ones, instant coffee is like warm water and dirt, okay? And we're drinking that, and these guys are talking. Now, you have to understand that John and Bill knew Bill W. and Lois and the early pioneers, Bill D. and a lot of these guys. So, who knows what they may have been sharing with me. It seems like it all happened at once, and I know it happened over a period of time, but it just seems like it just came at me all at once. They were sharing that morning, and they're talking and carrying on, and I thought it was my turn. You're only laughing because you've made the same mistake. What I didn't tell you is that at that time, my vocabulary did not resemble where it is today, because I could get about a 7-word sentence out, and 3 of them started with F. Well, I said one of my sentences. Bill starts pounding his finger on the table, and he's glaring at me with one of his eyes. And he says, the first thing we clean up in here is our mouth. I'm thinking, Grumpy. I called that one right. So we leave, and I say to Big John, I said, what's up with him? I'm 25 years old. You guys are going to try to tell me how to talk? He said, yeah, kid. He said, you don't have to change much. You just have to change everything. And he said, Bill knows, of these people, and he kind of went through the men and the women that had trudged the road before them to make it possible for them to be sober. And he said, this program saved our life, and it might save your life, and you might be the only big book that some new guy and some new girl get to see. And he knows he wants you to be a good example. I want you to know that I bought into it. I just said, I'm done. That's cool. If that's what you want me to do, if the key to this thing is willingness, I'm going to listen to what you tell me, and I'm going to trust that it's going to be okay. And I began to do the things that they were suggesting for me to do. And they gave me a lot of suggestions. A lot of them. I was a door greeter. Okay? You got to be you're going to be a door greeter. This is at the Brown Towner. And I'm the door greeter. And people come in. Hi, nice to see you. Hi, how are you? And AJ comes in. And AJ is this guy who spent way too many hours on the golf course. And he's got this white hair and this beautiful tan. And he's always happy. And I said, hi, AJ. And he says, how are you? And I said, I'm okay. I said, how are you? Fantastic. I mean, this guy put a smile on his face bigger than his face, and it was just like, ugh. And I thought he was on pills. It was like, he's like, fantastic, and it just keeps getting better. And I'm thinking, wow, do you really mean that? I said, do you really mean that? And he says, yeah, I sure do. I went home back to John's place, and I thought, I want to be more like AJ. I want to be more like that guy, because I wasn't happy. I couldn't do that. I couldn't smile. My teeth were all rotten. And not only that, there was nothing for me to smile about. I would cheer up this whole room by leaving. Like somebody licked all the red off my candy. I make this decision that I'm going to be more like AJ. So now, we talk about honesty, okay? Well, honesty would have been, I feel like crap. But people would say, how you doing? And I would say, I'm doing good, and it keeps getting better, and I'm trying to smile, but it just doesn't quite work. I'm smiling with my mouth shut, okay? And today I know what I did. It wasn't that I was being deceptive or dishonest. I was just reporting the facts a little bit ahead of time. So people would be like, how you doing? I'd say, I'm doing good, and it's getting better. Man, this lady come up to me one night, and she just kind of, is taller than me, and she looks down, and she says, that's nice. Just wait till the pink cloud lifts. It's like, I wish she'd come in here right now. But I want you to know something. And I went to John wasn't my sponsor yet. I went to John and I said, what's up with this pink cloud stuff? And he says, don't you worry about that. You just keep doing what you're doing, kid. And I kept doing that. I kept getting better. And the reason I said John wasn't my sponsor yet, I have to tell you this story. And Alcoholics Anonymous really is a story handed down. Okay, that's what this program is. It's this, we share our experiences. If this was a program of lessons, okay, most of us would fail. Most of us would not be able to handle that. We would fail. But because this is a program of shared experience, all of us can be included. That's the unity. That's how our common welfare comes first. Personal recovery depends upon that. It's because we're sharing our experience. There's no grades in this. We don't have to have the book of lessons. Doesn't work anyway for an alcoholic. Only that works for an alcoholic is another alcoholic reaching him with a message of depth and weight. Something that makes sense. I don't have any idea what I was talking about. I just want you to know that, okay? Because it's like you think, wow, they really know what they're... So I'm going to the Brown Counter. I'm doing these things. John's got me going to the meetings. I'm getting better incrementally. A little bit better. I'm starting to feel better. I'm starting to be able to keep food down when I eat. I'm starting to like people. I'm starting to read the book and study the book. I'm taking the actions that they're suggesting for me to take, and I'm getting better. If John would have said to me, over the next couple of years, kid, I'm going to teach you a series of spiritual disciplines. And by you doing these on a regular basis and developing discipline, you're going to change the neurochemistry of your brain. And your brain's going to begin to produce chemicals that it doesn't produce right now. And as a result of it, you're going to feel good. I'd have gone out and drank. But what he said to me was, don't drink, do what we do, and your life's going to get better. It was so simple. Don't drink, do what we do, your life's going to get better. And then he would find ways to give me some recognition. One day he said, he would ask me to cook for him. So he said, kid, can you cook me some eggs and make some yolk on them? I'm like, well, I'll try. So I get all this hot grease going in the kitchen. I throw some eggs in there. They're frying up. I give them to him, and he brags about it for 2 days. This kid is a cook. Then he asked me to make him spaghetti and meatballs. And he said, can you make the meatballs round and make them so they stick together? Well, I grew up in Buffalo, so I can make a snowball like nobody's business. So I didn't know how to make spaghetti and meatballs. I went and got a jar of sauce, and I threw it in there, and I took probably the bacon grease from the breakfast that I made for him, and I took a dozen eggs and a couple of loaves of bread and a half a pound of hamburger, and I put it all together, and I made snowballs, and I tell you, they were white. And I fried these things up, and I threw them in the sauce, and he bragged 2 weeks about the kid that is the cook. He's like, this kid is the best cook I've ever had. His mother taught him how to make spaghetti and meatballs. I'm thinking my mother would be flipping out if she saw what I... But what he was doing is he was taking somebody that was broken. He was taking somebody who was a loser, somebody who was disappointed, somebody who had no self-esteem, who didn't believe that anything good was going to happen in his life. And he began to give me little things to do that I could do. And then he would recognize that I was doing them, and he would give me some praise for that. I want you to know that I wanted to be around him. I went down there to stay for 2 weeks. I stayed for 2 years. Now let me tell you about inconveniencing yourself. John was 80. He had a 1-bedroom apartment. He gave me the bedroom. He taught me that sometimes we need to inconvenience ourselves to help others. That sometimes we need to make a sacrifice, whatever that is, to be able to help someone else get up, stand up, and stay up. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for the men and the women that he introduced me to. I'm grateful for the opportunities that I was given, that they took the time and gave me patience. And they, it was like John he would speak at conferences, and he spoke out here, and I would drive him. He would tell the committee, the kid's going to drive me. Okay, I don't like to fly or something, So I would be driving, and he would be reading to me from AA literature, Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers, or AA Comes of Age, or something like that. And then he'd quiz me. What's Dr. Bob's address? It was like AA school on wheels. I was in the library one day, and I was talking to Dr. Bob's son, Smitty. And Smitty was in Al-Anon, but he was over there, and we were talking, and I had been sober for a little while. I just remembered what I forgot earlier, but I'm going to finish this and then go back to that before I forget this. And then I got to play a game of catch-up the whole time. And, I know that the comedian's next, so I don't want to be the warm-up speaker for the, Anyway, Smitty says to me, did John or Bill tell you about the first guy that my dad, Dr. Bob, and Bill W. worked with? Now, I'm like, I want to show him that I know. Oh, yeah, AA number 3, Bill D., Akron City Hospital. He was an attorney. He says, well, Mike, there was a guy before Bill D. He said this guy's name was Eddie R. He said Eddie was a bad drunk. He said Eddie would climb out the window at night down the drain pipe. He'd get drunk, and he'd call Dr. Bob and Bill, and he would tell them he's going to commit suicide, but he'd give them just enough time to come over and watch. And they'd round Eddie up, and they'd bring him back and try to get him sober. And he said Eddie one day was chasing Ann Smith, Dr. Bob's wife, around the house with a butcher knife. And he said they had to have Eddie committed. He said the first guy that Bill and Dr. Bob tried to help was a failure. He had to be committed. He said, but the story didn't end there. He said 15 years later at my dad's funeral, a guy came up to me and extended his hand and said, do you know who I am? And he looked and he said, you're Eddie. And he said, yes, and I've been sober for 2 years, and I'm a member of this group over here. And what I learned from that was that Alcoholics Anonymous wasn't built on success. Alcoholics Anonymous was an outgrowth of failure. And it was guys like me and guys like Eddie and men and women like you that made Alcoholics Anonymous work. And I knew because of that I belonged here. So the very first guy that struggled ended up playing a part in my story. And I'm so grateful for our history and for the men and the women who study it and have the opportunity to share it so that we know what went on 80 years ago as we get ready to celebrate AA's anniversary this week. I wonder if when they were putting it together, Bill was a dreamer. He knew there was possibly thousands of alcoholics out there suffering like he did that could use this. But did he have any idea? How could he? The golden thread. God pulling a golden thread through all of the circumstances and events that brought us to where we are tonight. Well, one thing I've learned in Alcoholics Anonymous is life continues to unfold and come at us. And it's not always what we want. It's not always the way that we picture it. Am I doing all right on time? Do you know? Am I good? Okay. So, I got to go back to that story first. Damn. I can't believe that. All right, it's June 10th, 1985, okay? June 10th, 1985, we're driving back from the meeting at the Brown Towner, and Big John says to me, well, kid, don't you think it's time you get a sponsor? I'm like, John, I've been living with you since May 5th. You're my sponsor. You haven't asked me yet, kid. The whole rest of the way home, it was like an 8-mile drive to Bangs where he lived. And I'm driving and my hands are sweating and my heart is pounding and I'm just freaking out, man. And I get to his house and we get in and I drink a couple glasses of water and I say, okay, John, will you do it? And he said, well, will I do what, kid? Will you sponsor me? I don't know if you want the deal bad enough yet. Ask me in 30 days. Now, I remembered that because it was AA's 50th anniversary, okay? But I want you to know, on July 10th, 1985, I walked out of that one bedroom, and I got out there to where he was, and I looked at him and said, John, will you be my sponsor? He says, I'd be honored to, kid. I said, well, what do I do, man? What do I got to do? And he said, well, you've been going to the meetings every day? And I said, yeah. He says, I see you, greeting and making the coffee and staying and cleaning up and sharing when you're called on and talking to the new guys. And I said, yeah. And I know you're reading your book and, we're talking about the steps and you're making some good progress there. I said, yeah. He says, If it works, don't fix it. I was waiting for wisdom. I wanted him to give me the answer. That was the answer. It's in the simplicity. It's in keeping this thing simple. It's in me not trying to figure it all out. I don't need to figure it out. I need to be around the people who are doing it and watch what they do, because I can pay attention to the evidence, and I can see the evidence in your life of a loving God, of a wonderful program, of a restored life. I can see that, and I began to see that in others, and because of that, I began to trust that that was going to be okay, and that was going to be my experience. But like I said, life comes at you, and everybody here knows that, and everybody here deals with that one day at a time. And I was down in Alabama doing a little business down there, and I came home, and it was a Friday morning. I'm out in the garage cleaning, and all of a sudden, my musing is interrupted by the narcotics department of the Chandler Police Department, and I find myself at 27 years sober laying in the hallway in handcuffs while they're arresting my son, who's 17 at the time. And I'm laying there in handcuffs next to my wife, thinking, or at least telling myself, your life's in divine order. Unfolding into goodness. What's so amazing about that is Josh's life is also in divine order, unfolding into goodness. And here, July 11th or something like that, he's here tonight. He'll celebrate 3 years. Now, Josh, don't get a big head. Big John would say to you that it's only 6 inches from a halo to a noose. But we're very grateful, we're very proud, and I think Joy would agree with me that we would invite the police to come anytime they want if the result was what we've been blessed with. And what Josh has, been blessed with. It's amazing. And I mentioned Joy and I mentioned Josh, but I gotta again go back a little bit. It's 1987, and it's time for me to leave Big John. It's time for me to move on. And I tell John I'm gonna go to Arizona, and I'm gonna live there, and I've got an alcoholic friend that's going to give me a job working construction, and I'm going to be the laborer. It was July. That second step took a long time. So I moved to Arizona, and I'm working a lot of guys. I'm doing all the AA, doing everything I can, and every now and then somebody will say, "Oh, you need more joy in your life," and that kind of thing. So I'm out by the pool, and this girl dies in the water. So I dove in after her, and she said, "My name is Joy," and I thought, exactly what I'm looking for. So she told me she was a school teacher and she was visiting from Michigan, and I told her I was an alcoholic, and I think I gave her 30 minutes of Bob White's last talk or something, and we went out on a date, and I keep asking her what exactly was said, because everything that you hear and everything that you say is your version of what happened, okay? And so my version of what happened, she got her fortune cookie, and it said, "You can trust the man you're with, his love is true." Okay? 4 months later, we were married, okay? And it's going to be 28 years in December, okay? How does that happen? How does it happen from a guy wearing somebody else's pants weighing 90 pounds to even being able to get married? I didn't have dreams. My dreams were gone. I was empty. I knew there was no reason to dream because it was never going to happen. My life was a life of emptiness and pain. That's what I had. Alcoholics Anonymous began little by little to fill me. We talk about the gift of sobriety, the gift of AA. Think about if someone gave you a beautiful package, a nice gift, and it had a nice, beautiful bow on it, and you took that gift and you put it in the closet, and you didn't open the gift. You would never know if you could benefit from the contents of the gift. If you're here tonight, open the gift of Alcoholics Anonymous in your life. Reach out to someone. Ask them to be your sponsor. Get a hold of the big book and start to learn what's in it. I said to John, I read it. And he said, what? And I said, the big book. And he said, kid, I read Moby Dick and I don't remember a damn bit of it. You got to study that book. And we began to study the book. I'm so grateful that he took the time to encourage me, to give me that guidance and direction and tell me that the essentials of recovery were honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And if I would just begin there and do what they were doing, I could have a different life. I was down in Myrtle Beach a few years ago speaking at a young people's event. That was the first one I ever went to, and if you've never been to one, wow. Yeah, I was like, I wasn't sure, man. I want you to know. You know, they started, it's like they were reading how it works, and it was interactive, okay? And I'd never seen anything like that. And I went up to my room that night, and I thought, I don't like this. You know, they're ruining it. And I thought for a minute, I kind of meditated, and I thought, what would Bill W., what would Dr. Bob, what would my dad, what would Big John, what would they say if they were in that room tonight with 500 young people all sober trying to help each other doing that? I believe that they would say, keep trying to carry the message to that still suffering alcohol. Keep doing what you're doing and lift those kids up and help them. Give them some direction and guidance like was given to you. I'm grateful that I had that experience. It was life-changing for me. And I got to meet a guy down there who had been in the movie business, and he said to me, that library that Bill and Arbutus had, Joy and I bought that a few years ago and brought it to Chandler to kind of rescue it, not knowing what we're doing. And I've been trying to get it digitized and make it available to all future generations of AA and Al-Anon and recovery people. And so anyway, I'm down there, and this guy, Bill, he says to me, we ought to write a book sometime. And I've been like Charles saying to me, next time you're out this way, let's play golf, because I'm not a writer and I'm not a golfer. So I said, okay, whatever, that's fine. So about a year later, my phone rings. I'm on my way to a meeting to Knuckleheads. I'll never forget it. And I'm on my way to I have a home group. It's called We Ain't Dead Yet. And I'm on my way to Knuckleheads, and the phone rings, and I answer it, and Bill says, are you still interested in writing a book? And I said, sure, why not? So we talked about what that might look like, what we'd do the book on. He says, would it be all right if I talked to the publisher to see if they would be interested in us doing a book together? And I said, well, that'd be fine, you know, go ahead. And then he called me a little while later, and he said, our publisher is excited, they want us to do the book. And I said, great. He said, would it be all right if I had my attorney negotiate the deal? I'm thinking, you're not doing too bad so far. You just keep right on going. So a little while later, I get a contract in the mail. I sign the contract. I send it in. I get a check. I do what we all do. I spend it. Then I'm thinking, my life's in divine order, unfolding in the goodness. I'm scared to death. I'd never written a word. I start writing, and then I share it with my sponsor and people in Alcoholics Anonymous, and they're like, this is good. This is good. You're doing good. Keep it up. And I walked through that experience, and I finished it, and the book came out. 10 months later, I got a call from the publisher, this time without the other author, and this time the publisher says, would you be willing to do another book for us? And so I had the privilege of doing 4 books in 2 years. Okay? It kept me really busy, but I want you to know that, again, it was something that I didn't set myself up to do. It was something that had to be done, that I was asked to do. And I began to do what I was taught in Alcoholics Anonymous, and that was to do the best that I can. And that's all I did. And good things happen. You know, your life today, my life is a life of abundance. And they told me that, well, the book says, if you're painstaking about this phase of your development, you'll be amazed before you're halfway through. It didn't say, if you're painstaking about this phase of your development, you're going to be moderately satisfied before you're halfway through. I mean, he used the word amazed. I don't know about you, but I want an amazing life, okay? I don't want just a mediocre life. I want an amazing life. I want that new freedom and new happiness. I want to know how to do that. I want to be able to share that with someone. I want someone to see me and say, I want what he's got. I want to do what he's doing. That's what I want to have happen, because that's what happened to me by being around you. If I would have come up here tonight and said, I'm Mike and I'm an alcoholic, you guys would have been going, what's this? Where'd they get him? And Dave's over there wondering that. Our life just, my life is continued to get better, but it's been faced with challenges. This past year has been kind of challenging for Joy and I. Our daughter Emily has another illness, and she was very, very sick during this illness, had to have multiple surgeries. There was some time during that we weren't sure she was going to make it. And, we were showing up. We had tremendous support from the fellowship, but we were showing up, doing what we could do, and she was getting better and eventually had a final surgery, and that worked, and she got healthy. But after all that she had gone through, the dragon was awoken, and Emily's got 53 days today. Now, when you're an alcoholic dad and your kids get sober, you're like, yeah. Joy's like, not another one. We are blessed to have a fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. It is a family recovery. It's a family illness, and it's a family recovery. And I'm grateful that my kids are here, that we can share these things. 2 years ago, my oldest brother Jim, was suffering with lung cancer, and it was getting toward the end of his life. And I called him and told him that I was going to come and visit him, like that's a big deal. But Jim and I weren't that close. And so I had made arrangements to go, and I called him shortly before the trip, and he said, where are you going to stay? And I thought, well, I'm going back there. I'll stay with my mother. I don't want to be a burden on him, and I already had that planned out. So I said, I'm going to stay at Ma's house. And I could tell that affected him. And I hung up the phone, and I talked to Joy. I picked the phone back up, and I said, did you want me to stay with you? He said, yes, I've been looking forward to it, and I'll pick you up at the airport. Okay. So I go back and I stay with him. And he's very sick. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. And I thought what Howard taught me to do. I helped him, and we went back through his life, and we looked at the circumstances and events of his life that brought him to where he was. And I told him you can trust in the outcome. And I wasn't sure if he could or not, but I could see that this was okay. We could have this conversation. I didn't know what to do, but I knew what to do because you taught me. You gave me that encouragement. I could be there for him. And I stayed. We really had a good time. And he passed away 11 days later on Emily's birthday. So I went back and did the eulogy for his funeral. And at the time, my mother was worn down because she had been taking care of Jim, or trying to the best that she could. And she had 48 years in Al-Anon at the time. And she had a little bit of a cold, seemed a little run down, but overall in really good health. So I went home, and no big deal. And about a week later, I get a phone call that they took her to the hospital, and they weren't sure what was going on. They thought she had a heart attack. Well, they put her in the hospital, and she stays there, and she had her body just kept shutting down. Different things were just shutting down. No real reason for it, okay? And I didn't want to go back there because, one, I didn't have any unfinished business, and two, I did not want her to think that I thought she wasn't going to get well. So the morning before she passed away, she's in the hospital, and she says, I want Mike here. Now, the great alcoholic mind says, what does she want me there for? We don't have any unfinished business. But I got the next plane, and I got there, and I went in the room that night, and all of the grandchildren are there, all the kids, everybody's in the room, and we all say a prayer. They all split, and I'm there alone with my mom. I want you to know I didn't know what to say. And before I got on the airplane, I talked to Howard. And Howard said, this is what you say. And I looked at her and I said, Howard told me what to say. And I was able to deliver a message of love, a message of gratitude. I left the room that night and I realized she didn't have me there for her. She had me there because what I could bring to the others. Because she knew what Alcoholics Anonymous has done in my life. She has seen the example. And that's all we are. We're examples of what this program is. Dr. Bob in his last talk said if you simmered Alcoholics Anonymous down to two things, that would be love and service. My grand sponsor, Big John's sponsor, his name was Dick Breen. And Dick closed one of his talks and he said, a bell is not a bell until we ring it. And a song is not a song until we sing it. And love wasn't put in our hearts to stay. Love is only love when we give it away. And to me today, Alcoholics Anonymous is only AA if we give it away. Thank you.